into the same old game. Here's Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger potion.
Wow, so serious.
Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Well, welcome to this podcast review for August 27th, 2024, and I am JD Duran. Brendan is still gone. He has left me during the busiest week of the year for us, believe it or not, late August, which is usually a dumping ground for cinema. But for us, especially this year, it has been crazy. So if you follow us at all, you'll probably be aware that our 2000 retrospective is now up. It's available. Go check it out. We had a review of Almost Famous. We talked about our top 10 movies of 2000. And next week's show, 600, episode 600, is our Best of the Decade Awards, which will involve a lot. So he left me. He just left me alone. So I have found a guest for this episode. And I'm very excited to bring back the one, the only, you love him, we all love him, the great Dave Giannini. Dave, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I mean, not to spoil anything, but I love that you only bring me on for movies that I'm obsessed with. I think the last movie I came on for was Immaculate. And here we are again, buddy.
Absolutely. You know, you do a lot in your day-to-day with us at In Session Film, and God knows everything else you have going on in your life. I don't need to bring you here for misery.
Right.
I just need to uplift your spirit. That's my goal here.
I love it.
So, I do appreciate you filling in and being here to talk about some Ethan Hawke. Mm-hmm. Again, another person that we all love and cherish and adore. He's one of the best. And he has a new film out that stars his lovely daughter, Maya Hawke, that we're going to talk about. It is called Wildcat. Many of you may have heard of it. You probably know it. If you're listening to this, it's likely you've seen the film. Dave, I'm curious, before we get into it, what were your expectations for this? Did you have any sort of, also, I'm kind of leaving out a lot because Dave has a really fun story about his experience watching this movie. Maybe
no big deal.
There. No big deal. He just hung out with Ethan Hawke, in person.
That's I think excessive. I don't think Ethan Hawke would remember me, but I, as JD used to before he abandoned the great state of Kentucky.
Not by choice.
I live in Lexington, Kentucky, which is also the home ground of one Steve Zahn, who is also in this movie. So because of that, this never happens in Kentucky. But Ethan Hawke and Steve Zahn came to the Kentucky Theater, which is, not our best theater, but it's like the coolest theater. It's the oldest theater. They show not just the movies that the major.
I miss it desperately.
Oh, I got to see, all of Tarkovsky's movies on a big screen. It's a cool place like that, or pompous, depending on your perspective. But they came to the Kentucky for one of the premieres of Wildcat. So there was a Q&A with both Steve Zahn and Ethan Hawke. I passed Ethan Hawke in the bathroom. That is something that happened in my life. So that's pretty cool. But in terms of expectations, my expectations for this are actually pretty high. Because I'm a big Flannery O'Connor fan, which is who this movie is about. It is an author that was kind of life-changing for me as a youth. Gaining an understanding that just because a character is present in a story does not mean it is someone to look up to, and taking risks in the stories. And, it also made me check my own perspectives, because you hear the name Flannery O'Connor and you might think that that is a male writer. And I remember I had read 3 or 4 of her short stories and then was informed that this is a female writer. And I was like, whoa, wait, what? like had
Yeah.
no clue, because it's a name that is not necessarily gendered. So it does make
Sure.
you think
Yeah.
about, like, okay, perspective. I have to kind of reset and be like, oh, that's a blind spot for me. Even as a boy, that is a blind spot, and I have to kind of course correct. So she was a very important author to me in my youth. So the idea of someone making a Flannery O'Connor biopic is stupid. There's no, you shouldn't make this. You absolutely should not make a biopic about Flannery O'Connor. So my expectations were both high and low, right? I wanted it to be great.
Sure.
And also Ethan Hawke is involved, who's one of my very favorite actors, which is weird because if you, not to get too much into Ethan Hawke's career, but if you would have told me that when I was young, that Ethan Hawke would become one of our greatest actors, I'm not sure I would have bought it. I'm not sure the guy who was in Hamlet 2000 was going to be one of our greats, but here we are. And if you listen to that man talk about the
Oh my
craft,
gosh.
I mean,
Yeah.
he not only is passionate, but super knowledgeable and intense about it, and he makes very difficult topics seem easy to understand. So I getting to watch a Q&A with him about his relationship with his daughter, about filmmaking, it was for a film geek, I mean, it's a gift. Like, I was just wrapped. I was like, can we be here for like 4 hours? Can we just talk about stuff, man? I feel like we would be friends. Can we just hang out? So it was a really great experience to get to experience not only this on a big screen, but also to see one of the creators of it, although he would balk at the idea of being seen as a creator of this movie, because a lot of the script is directly taken from Flannery O'Connor's letters. And this was actually Maya Hawke's passion project. She came to him and said, I want to do a Flannery O'Connor movie, and I want you to direct me in it. And how do you, as a dad, like, how do you say no to that?
Yeah, you can't say no.
Okay, I guess that's my next project. Like,
I guess that's what I'm doing.
Where we are. Yeah.
No, absolutely. No, that is very exciting to hear. I am extremely envious. I do miss the Kentucky and want to go back. I have so many great memories of going to that.
And
theater.
they've redone it. It's nicer now.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I absolutely love that theater. I wish I could have been there to experience that. I also love Ethan Hawke. He's one of my very favorite actors working today. His directorial efforts I also love, and that is honestly a big part of why I was excited for Wildcat. I mean, obviously Ethan Hawke is a great actor, to Dave's point, but I also have really cherished his directorial efforts. Seymour: An Introduction, I thought, was a really great documentary in 2014, and I fell in love with Blaze in 2018. I thought it was one of the more underrated films of that year. It was fantastic. Love the music. Love how that film was told. So that alone made me excited for Wildcat. In addition to what you were also just saying there, Dave, and that Ethan Hawke he's not just a great actor. He's becoming a promising director at this stage of his career, but the man is a true artist. As pretentious as that may sound, when you do listen to him talk, regardless of how you feel about his movies as an actor or director, if you are someone like us who just simply appreciates art, broadly speaking, listening to him talk is fascinating. Like,
really
he is able to articulate why we respond to art, why it's so powerful, in ways that few are able to do so. And it truly is incredible. So yeah, anytime you get a chance to hear him talk in person or otherwise, you certainly should take up that opportunity.
And the greatest compliment I can give him is that listening to him talk about movies reminds me of listening to Martin Scorsese talk about movies.
Sure.
It's like that level of passion and care about the art form, about the craft. And that, if anybody knows me, there is no greater compliment than being compared to Marty Scorsese in any way. But really, I get that same emotion when I hear him. Like, I just get swept away in the way he talks about it. I just heard an interview with him recently where he talked about he wished at film school for directors they taught them acting, because a lot of directors, they get annoyed with actors for asking the question why. And he's like, no, this is a part of I have to know why. It's not just because it looks good on a screen. I got to know why I'm walking that way and why I'm doing this action. And just hearing him talk about that, you're like, yeah, they should teach that in film school right along with cinema. It's a part of the form, and he just gets it.
He does. It's fascinating to hear him talk about. And then Wildcat on its own terms, it is a Maya Hawke project, as you noted. I very much look forward to talking about her performance here shortly. And also a big reason they, of course, had this interview at the Kentucky Theater. The principal photography for this film was in Kentucky.
Sure was.
They shot a lot in Louisville, but they also filmed in Shelbyville and Frankfurt. And if you're
so crazy to hear those names,
I know,
involved in a major mosaic like Shelbyville. What is happening?
I know. I mean, and it's crazy, like living there for the better part of a decade, being to Frankfurt, God knows how many times, been to Shelbyville a few times. And yeah, I mean, you're talking about rural Kentucky at that point. And it is interesting to hear that. And like, to your point, see that in a movie like this directed by Ethan Hawke. It's like, man, these worlds are colliding.
It's got some serious tax credits, baby, but we'll take it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, I guess with all of that said, let's go ahead and dig into this. It is, of course, written and directed by Ethan Hawke and stars Maya Hawke, as well as Laura Linney, Steve Zahn, Cooper Hoffman, Raphael Cassell, and a bunch of others that come and go throughout the film. Philip Ettinger, I guess I should mention, as Cal Lowell, who is somewhat significant at the beginning of this film. If you're not familiar with Wildcat, I mean, I don't really know how to break this down. No synopsis will do it justice. I think we'll simply say it is somewhat of a biopic about Flannery O'Connor. I guess I can just leave it as vague as that. And we'll talk about it.
And also a narrative representation of many of her short stories as well, weaved in. Yeah. It's very odd, for sure.
It is. Yeah, we'll talk about all of that. So let's get into it. Dave, what did you think about Wildcat?
All right. So let me say this. I will understand if people think this movie is okay. I will understand if people don't like this movie. I think it's brilliant. I think it's tremendous. You had mentioned in your little Twitter review that it's messy, and it is a deeply messy film, but I think that is purposeful. I think we are inside the brain of Flannery O'Connor. And the choices that this movie makes, it's like, it is not a womb to tomb biopic, which God bless you, Ethan Hawke, for not doing that. Because there's not, honestly, like, I just think we've gotten to the point where we realize that doesn't work. It never works. Like these biopics that start with birth and end with death, they don't work. So you got to find a way in. And of course, the best decision to find a way into an author is through her stories. And there's a quote somewhere in this movie that talks about, she hated the idea of people saying that writing was avoiding reality. Instead, writing is diving headfirst into reality. And the way that this movie is structured, where you get bits from her stories and how they relate to her real life and how these things interweave, is a real gutsy move from a screenwriting perspective. Because you just, especially if you're not a Flannery O'Connor fan, like you're not someone who's read her short stories, you may feel lost. You may feel completely unmoored. Like, why is that the same actor? Why? And they're the same actors because they are all representative of her experience and of her life. And I absolutely adore that that's the way they chose to do it. But I can also understand why people would be kind of turned off by this. But let me say this. Maya Hawke, I was not familiar with your game meme. Like that's how I felt, because I am not I am not a fan of that stupid 80s Netflix show that she is a part of, which I won't even mention. Nonsense. But this is maybe the best performance of the year that I've seen. I think it's phenomenal. Like, she really owns that role. And I can't imagine how terrifying this must have been for her. Like, to pick your favorite author, your hero, and try to perform as her, do an accent, and not make her out to be a picture of perfection. This is a real human that we see interacting on the screen. And I've watched this movie 3 times now. And every time I watch it, Maya Hawke disappears. It's Flannery O'Connor on the screen. And I never thought I would be able to see that. And, there are other really good performances here. Laura Linney having a great time in many of her roles. But I think, like, this is Maya Hawke's movie in many ways. It's her passion project, but she owns the screen. And, like, to work, like, Laura Linney, talk about underrated, like, one of our great actors, truly one of our great living actors. And Maya Hawke is never intimidated. She is never outacted. She has never had circles run around her. She is just phenomenal in every single moment here.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I mean, I dig this film. I really like it a lot as well. It is ambitious, arguably to a fault, as it tries to tap into the creative mind of someone like Flannery O'Connor. There is enough cogency, I think, to its biopic through lines that make her story accessible and poignant. But there is a lot about the narrative structure here that poetically blurs the line between fiction and reality. When the scene starts, we don't know which is which at first.
I love it. Yeah. Even the very beginning, where it's like a movie trailer or something in the very beginning. Yeah. There's risks.
It takes some investigating and active participation to make sense of it. And I love how Ethan Hawke invites you to engage with the film in that way. It might not be for everybody. I do understand that can draw frustration with some audiences, but I do admire that approach deeply, especially when you consider Flannery's writing and how it tethers to her faith specifically, which is quite volatile for her. She talks about how she sees grace. It's something that is perhaps feasible, but she can't touch it. It feels distant and foreign. And that dichotomy is constantly at odds with one another. And the way Ethan Hawke and co-writer Shelby Gaines structure the film from a writing point of view, it mirrors that tug of war in Flannery. So as she grapples with what life throws at her, whether it be with her mom, Cal's potential romanticism, finding out she has lupus, and how all of those things affect her faith, we see that directly influenced with her writing. And as a result, from scene to scene, there's a concoction of reality and fiction at play as she uses her life to decipher some sort of truth as it relates to God and his role in our lives, which, of course, is manifested through her incredibly creative and stark writing. And the film is asking you to actively engage with Flannery, or at least experience with her what it's like to be stuck between these two worlds. And I thought that was a brilliant move. It's bold. Again, I can understand why that won't work for everybody, but I did find that blistering here, particularly because of Maya Hawke's performance. I completely agree. It is one of the best of the year. She completely disappears into the role. It is a textured nuance that, from a psychological and emotion perspective, swings in all of these directions. And I love the choices that she makes as an actress. And it makes the dynamic with all of these actors that come and go. And you will recognize a bunch of them. They're in this film very briefly, but she makes those interactions very memorable. And I love that about this movie.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think, there are going to be moments, especially the first time you watch it, if, you might not rewatch it like me, but if you watch it once, there are going to be moments where you're going to be confused, where you're going to be like, is this real or is this not? Is this heightened because we're in her mind, or is this heightened because it's a representative of one of her stories? And I would argue that it doesn't matter which one it is, because this is the whole point. Like, okay, there's two overarching things going on. There is her battle with the real world, and there is the story world. But they're not separate. They intersect with one another in really powerful ways. There is one of the kind of short story sequences is there is a scene where the lead character, played by Flannery O'Connor, played by Maya Hawke, launches and attacks a character played by the actress who plays her mother, because she is saying hideous things that she thinks are Southern nice. Right. The things like, no, I'm not one of the bad racists. I'm a nice racist. Like, it's just like you watch it and like Laura Linney is so good in that scene that you're just like, and actually there's two different sequences where a Flannery O'Connor character either attacks or talks poorly to the mother character. One in which she is dressed a very masculine way, and one in which a very feminine way. And I like that interchange too. It would be very easy for these moments to be silly and overt. And instead, you find that like we have all had relationships with family members who say terrible things. And there's a moment where she launches herself at her, and I'm just like, yes. Like, you have that moment of like, we all want to do this. We all have this fantasy of that one horrible relative who says racist stuff, and you're like, you deserve a beating. Like, that's just all there is to it. That's really what no, you can't. So it's like her id coming out, like just launching out and attacking the wrongs that are being done. And I think, again, this would be very easy to be silly. And because of Maya Hawke's performance, it's not actually everyone else who grounds it. Maya Hawke is the one who grounds these moments, because these other characters are there to teach a lesson. They are meant to be broad representations of something, whether it be false faith, whether it be Southern white women who have deep racist tendencies in their bodies. Like, they are meant to be super, super broad. Flannery is the only one who is in some ways like an actual real character of depth. And that is a really interesting balance to have to do in this movie, where this is the person you're following, and there's actually not many other characters that you're like, oh, I want to hang out with them. They seem nice. It's really all about Flannery. So it's a lot for Maya Hawke as an actress to take on, and she meets that challenge at every single turn.
I completely agree. And as it relates to the blurring between fiction and reality and how that relates to her duality of faith, I think the sequences that struck a chord with me the most is that moment near the end of the film when she wants to have a one-on-one conversation with her priest, played by Liam Neeson here.
Might be the best scene in the movie.
Yeah, like, she goes on this phenomenal monologue talking about her faith, how she can see it, but she can't really touch it. It's foreign. It's really cathartic. It's poignant, but there's also this daunting quality underneath that makes it extremely palpable. And of course, Maya Hawke just really chews on the dialogue impeccably. It really is a fascinating moment. But I think what's great about it is that even though she can't really grasp onto it, there is something about her catharsis there that evokes this idea that she wants it to be real. Like, I want to experience what everyone else seems to be as it relates to faith in God, but she just can't. So it's this fascinating thing of her wanting it, which is juxtaposed in the next sequence that immediately follows, where she strikes a relationship with this Bible salesman straight out of Paper Moon, in which she adamantly articulates to him that she doesn't believe in God. And it's fascinating to see how she almost not just contradicts, she's almost like a completely different character from one moment to the next. And to your point earlier, which of those sequences is real and which one is a short story of hers? Honestly, you can make an argument for both. going both ways, and it doesn't matter. Like it truly doesn't matter which one
She contains
is
both.
grounded in fiction or reality. Exactly. It does feel like it's a little bit of both. And that's why I argue in my opening thoughts that despite the disjointed or structure here, like there's still a cogency to her story, and especially her emotional arc in this film and the relationships around her, like how that manifests in her writing. You know, regardless of which one is grounded in fiction and which one is grounded in reality, that duality of faith is still something that she has to grapple with. Like her disease is something that she still has to grapple with, and it affects her relationships. Like part of the stakes of her moment there with the Bible salesman played by Cooper Hoffman here, and, you know, it like there's like a physical inability for her to like keep up with his antics. I'll say vaguely, I guess, without going to get the spoilers.
Sure.
And I find all of that fascinating, and that moment with Liam Neeson especially is one of the best scenes of the year, I think.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. I mean, I'm glad I get a chance to talk about this movie because, like, no one's doing a podcast on Wildcat. I was lucky enough.
The only one.
I was lucky enough. I worked for a bunch of sites, and I did a review for a site called Geek Vibes Nation, and I felt very grateful to be able to write that. And this movie maybe impacted me more than any other movie this year. It's like between this and I Saw the TV Glow are the two movies I had the most visceral emotional reaction to. And a lot of it is because of my own history with faith. I was someone who was raised Catholic and, you know, eventually got to the point that I don't believe in anything. I'm an atheist. You know, when you're in high school and you just got to be edgy about everything. And then getting to a point later where, like, well, maybe, right? Maybe I'm agnostic. Maybe I don't really know what's going on. And eventually throughout my life, for different reasons, coming back to a kind of faith and rediscovering that. So to see this battle of the mind, of the heart, of the soul portrayed so beautifully by Maya Hawke in this movie, it was like, I mean, I was moved to tears by this movie because I truly felt represented in that moment. Like, yes, that is it. She talks about, there's a dinner party scene, one of the most awkward dinner parties you'll ever attend, because Flannery O'Connor is going to say what she thinks. And she talks about, like, what's the point if it's easy? People think that religion is the easy way out, but not if you truly believe. It's harder. It's harder to live your life in a way that is appropriate if you truly believe in what's happening. And then that scene that you mentioned with her priest, where they talk about grace, and people think, again, they think it's easy. They think obtaining grace is this beatific, beautiful moment, but they don't talk about what comes before that. When God or religion or faith or your own process cuts at you with a sword to clean you, to prepare you for grace. And that is like, I've never heard anyone talk about it like that. But that is what it's like to be a person of actual faith. Like, you have to cut away all the BS, and you have to try to accept things you can't touch. They talk about, sometimes people talk about faith like, oh, it's easy. You just believe in fairy tales and things you can't see. As a thinking human, do you know how hard that is? Do you know how hard it is to believe in something I can't touch, I can't smell, I can't see, I can't prove? That's really difficult if you're truly a person of belief. And this is not about a particular religion, a particular faith, a particular God. This is about being connected spiritually to anything, and how hard that is to do, and how it is a daily battle, not a once in a lifetime battle. Because if you believe and you never have any questions, do you really believe? Or are you just doing what you're told? And it's something I love about Flannery's character in here. She is not someone who does as she's told. She is constantly questioning faith, religion, laws, race, family.
Yeah.
She questions absolutely everything, which is the greatest curse a person who is trying to have faith can have, is someone who questions. And that scene where she is breaking down with her priest and blocking him really at most every turn is really hard to watch. Like, I watch that and I'm just like, I want to run away, because this is a conversation that isn't necessarily going to have a good end, especially with a priest so calm, and she's not, and she wants to just burst, and you can see it. And it's another thing that this movie does really well for a person with a physical infirmity. She wants to lash out, she wants to do something, but she can't. And she knows at some level the thing that we don't want to admit, that life for a person of faith contains a great deal of suffering. There's a moment late in the film where another character comments, like, how nice that you have this view. And she realizes, to be creative, to be expressive, she needs the pain. So she blocks the view. And it is like, it is such a great moment. And I was just like kind of stunned by the way it was all orchestrated. And it's both uplifting and terrifyingly sad at the same time. Like, to really engage with being an artist and being an honest artist, it means pain. And that is a hard thing to swallow when you're just going to the movies looking to be entertained. This is not that kind of movie.
It's definitely not. And I think what's so fascinating about what you're talking about there with Flannery and Maya Hawke's performance, how she evokes those ideas of faith here, I was really moved by the conviction of the character and how she engages with that battle with this fervent sincerity, because there are several moments here through either her writing, voiceover, her speaking to other characters, where she is actively talking about her faith. We see her praying to God in several different scenes here as well. There's a moment where I believe it was the scene actually when she's talking to the priest, where she straight up asks him, how do I be a good Catholic? Like, there's another moment in this film where she says, I long for grace. So again, you can sense that earnestness in the character, but through these things that happen to her, it does feel as if there's some void that she is not able to fulfill through at least her version of faith that she is experiencing. And it does foster this incredible dichotomy in the character that is constantly at war with each other, which is what I love, again, about the structure of this film and how it blurs reality and fiction, because it is her writing that offers her not an escape, but an opportunity for her to wrestle with those things. And again, I believe you mentioned that in your opening thoughts, that the sequences here that are the manifestations of her writing, like there's some sort of truth to that. Like there's a real reality that is born out of that. And so like, whether it be her actual reality or her writing, those things do coexist here. And it's fascinating to see how that comes about. And I love the visuals of it all as well in Ethan Hawke's direction, like how he like shoots this film. Like, it has this incredible lens to it. I'm not exactly sure if he talked about it when you were interviewing him or when he was doing the thing at the Kentucky, but there's an interesting color palette to this film, some sort of filter on the lens that gives the film some sort of angelic like quality when you see the images here, that I think help complement that longing for faith. And it's also interesting, the juxtaposition of her wanting to fill this void through finding grace, when a lot of her writing is actually kind of dark, and it's kind of born
Yes.
from this eccentricity that you don't typically find with writers that are evoking that kind of faith, or as this film evokes with that kind of faith. But I do love that, because one of the strongest lines of this film that I really loved, and maybe this was also in that moment with the priest. Again, that scene is so good. But like, one of the lines that really stands out to me here is when she's talking about God finding you not in the light, but in the dark.
Mhm.
That's where faith is likely born out of the most. And again, like, from a broad perspective, that does seem to contradict how God is often talked about as being associated with the light and,
Totally.
being drawn to the light. But it's really when you're at your lowest, that's when
Mhm.
you find God the most. And her articulating that in this film, like, I feel like so much of everything that comes before that moment with the priest is kind of born there, and then it just kind of spills out in this beautiful, eloquent way when she's having that conversation with the priest. But yeah, I love the nuances of that here.
Yeah, you're right. God is God, or whatever you want to call him, her, they, it. Many times is thought of as a symbol of light, and
Yeah,
the other thing as a symbol of darkness. But faith is easy when you're in the light.
yes,
When things are going well, it's easy to believe in God because good things happen to good people and good things are happening to me. So there must be a God. The real challenge comes when you're diagnosed with lupus, or when they won't let you write your novel, or when your short stories fail, or when the man that you fall in love with is a cad and is not interested in you in that way. Right.
And your
when
mom is
everything
handing out pennies to little boys, and it's awkward and weird.
when everything falls apart, that's when faith is both tested and is the most important. And that is when you will discover if it's for you. Because it's so easy to accept grace when you're a success. And I love that this movie also plays with the idea of, can I be a successful artist and a person of faith?
Yeah.
Or does the idea of me wanting money, success, adoration, does that take me out of God's light?
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting kind of dichotomy that they're putting in the middle of this movie, where at first you're kind of rooting for her to succeed behind her wildest dreams. And then you're kind of like, wait, how do you remain pure with money and fame and adulation? That's a really tough balance.
And that is another moment in this film. I want to say it's when she's talking with her mom about writing and how her faith can come through in her writing, because her mom does not care for it at all.
Much, really.
Exactly. Yeah. But there is that moment where she confronts Flannery about, like, why don't you want to write something that people will like? And
it's a great funny line too. Like, have you ever thought of writing something someone might enjoy? Like, and that's brought up in the very beginning too, when she's going to her editor and he's like, you seem to be attacking your readers for wanting to read your stories. It's like, but great art must challenge.
Exactly.
Great art does not just tell you what you want to hear.
Exactly.
This is something that gets me in trouble when I talk about movies. It's like, movies that sell out theaters are rarely, if ever, great artistic pieces. Deadpool and Wolverine is not going to be seen as one of the greatest pieces of art from 2024. It'll make the most money.
Don't sit there and pretend that movie didn't challenge you. It might not have in an artistic way, but
that's true. It challenged me to remain seated. That's true. No, I'm just kidding. I actually didn't mind that movie. I think it's stupid but entertaining. But great art is going to challenge. This is why, in general, like, movies that are universally lauded when they first come out generally do not stay there. because the real works of art and of genius are the movies that are like, to use a Rotten Tomatoes, like 60-70%. Like there's some people that really don't like it, and there's some people that really connect to it. And it's a really, and art is challenging in that way.
Yeah.
It needs to be. And one of the things I kept walking away from this movie with that just really struck me is the idea of a family curse for Flannery. I think there are two curses working at the same time. There's the curse of lupus that her father passed down to her. Yes. Right. They make a very clear point of like saying like, this is what dad died of. Things are a little bit different now, but you have it now, and you're going to have to live with this and struggle. And they show the gigantic needle, like that looks like a needle for a horse. I don't want that going into me, but I want to live because I want to create and I want to do honor to my higher power. All these things come in. And then you have the curse of her mother. Yeah. Who is the curse of the nice Southern person. Yeah. Right. Because you see her interact and her other relatives in this way of like, saying the stuff about Gone with the Wind that is like vaguely racist and talking about like, why don't you just write a book about nice people? And it's like, because look around. Yeah. People here aren't nice. I don't know any nice people. I know people who have darkness in them, but it's hidden by polite society. And there is a part of her that is affected and infected by that. And she's constantly fighting against it. So it becomes a thing like, do I give in to the curse of my mother or the curse of my father? And I think that is such a great structure for her journey in this. And not that she really has a choice, but I think internally she has this choice. She decides on a life of pain so she can be the best person and the best artist that she possibly can be. And that decision is momentous. In such a small scale movie, you really do feel that she has figured this out. That like, I love my mother, even if I don't like her, but I'm not going to be her. I am going to be the best person I can be while struggling, while suffering, while being in pain until the day I die. That is, for lack of a better term, that is the cross that she has chosen to bear. And it is deeply, deeply moving, leading to that moment where she blocks herself from beauty to create. And you want to find out if you really care about art, if you want to really care about creation, that's the test. Do I choose comfort? Or do I choose genuine expression and honoring my higher power? And she chooses the latter, which you're left with. I don't know if this is good. I don't know if that's the choice I would make, but I think it's an honorable choice. And it really honors Flannery O'Connor, which I think should be the goal of this biopic. So to me, it's like on that level, it's just a resounding success.
I agree. And Laura Linney is having an absolute ball here.
She's just eating scenery.
just absolutely chewing it up. And it is glorious to see. She plays that Southern politeness so impeccably here.
Yes.
And yet, underneath the veneer of that is something that is a little gross. And it's fascinating to see Flannery recognize that and confront her on it. There's so many moments of conflict here between those two characters and how that manifests through her writing, which again, with the way Ethan Hawke directs this film, comes through in these incredible sequences that are really fascinating here. And I also think that is complemented by, although it's not quite as pivotal of an aspect of the film, but her relationship with Cal, as we see early on, and the potential romanticism that could have blossomed out of that, because you do have to wonder that despite the disease, despite her mom, her wavering faith, as we've been talking about, what if Cal acted on his promise to come down to see her? And they did engage in a relationship. You do have to wonder if maybe she would have taken that opportunity. And if she did, how does that revert against that idea of suffering that you're talking about. And I think that's what's so captivating about that sequence there at the end, again, with the Bible salesman and how that ultimately crystallizes, because it does seem as if it's this piece of writing that is her giving her some sort of, I don't know, catharsis or way to express how that part of my life is not something that I'll be able to act on. And it's interesting how that is immediately followed or preceded, I'm trying to recall here, but it's very close to the moment where she gets the letter, and I guess spoiler alert here, but she gets the letter from Cal that he is engaged to Elizabeth and that they're going to be married. And when she gets that letter, that's when she decides, okay, I'm going to settle on my life of writing, and I'm going to engage and indulge in that suffering that you're talking about. So I do think that is quietly a big moment in this film. And again, how the reality and the fiction blurs itself there at the end, I just think is fascinating as well.
Yeah. I mean, and look at the impact that has, because these things are not certainly in any kind of order, right? It's like, the short stories in these different spots, but think about the men in these short stories. You have the Steve Zahn character who like marries a girl and then leaves her at a diner. You have the Bible salesman who literally steals a part of this woman and runs away. And you have Rafael Cazal's character, who I think is symbolic of false faith, right? A faith that is literally skin deep. He has a picture of Jesus Christ,
great tattooed
on him. It is beautiful. It is beautiful. But I love the character that Flannery is playing in that moment, where in true faith fashion, she says, that's not him.
Yeah.
We are never supposed to look upon him. We're not supposed to be able to look, to touch, to see, to smell, to taste. He is human and divine. It is not for my eyes to see. And I love like all of those sequences put together. Like this is essentially her experience with men. Is that they will lie to you. They will tell you one thing to your face and walk away and do the other. And I think that relationship with that character, it like just seeps into her writing, not necessarily as a pure representation of that man, but of men in general. And I think it's done in a really interesting way where it's not a like, it's not Alex Garland's Men. It's like much more subtle that, and I just really, really admire the craft of this film, the acting, the directing, the screenplay, all taken from her actual words, the look of the film. Like, I just think it's tremendous. And I think for me, it is a sad loss because I think it has gotten completely lost for most people and it didn't get the greatest reviews. And I can understand the complaints, but this is a movie that I would recommend to anyone who admires art, anyone who struggles with faith, anyone who wants to see a quintessential great performance from a young actress who I now expect grand things from moving forward. And before this, I was like, Maya Hawke, she's okay, I guess. And now I'm like, what is she doing next? Because I need to see the next movie that she makes. I will not be watching Stranger Things, but I will be watching the next movie she makes.
Except for that. No, I agree. I love those sequences in the film. It's not one that you can recommend to everybody, obviously, but
watch me.
As disjointed as the film is, I agree with you. I do think a lot of it is purposeful. It is trying to blur those lines between fiction and reality, and you have to be willing to engage with the film. It is inviting you to participate. That is Ethan Hawke's motive first and foremost. And I do think, well, I guess I was about to go down a path I probably should stay away from, but let me just put it this way. I loved that Ethan had that invitation. I took it as passionately as I could, and I enjoyed it. I don't think that, at least reading some reviews out there, it seems as if not everyone was willing to do that.
I agree.
But you have to. Like, that's the only way this film works, I think. And also Maya Hawke's performance. I agree with you. Like we've been talking about, it is one of the best of the year. There's a sorrow to it that is incredibly palpable here. And she just completely owns this role. You know, the monologue scene at the end is one of the best scenes of the year as well. And it's an incredibly immersive experience and performance. And I love it, man. God bless Laura Linney as well. I will say, as far as the supporting cast goes, I really enjoy Rafael Casal. The few things I've seen him in, I've always really enjoyed him, and I think he's very good here.
Yeah, watch Blind Spotting if you haven't seen that.
Great.
Watch Blind.
He's so entrancing in that film. But I think he actually gives one of the better supporting performances here, to your point, as this individual who doesn't really believe, but ends up evoking some sort of faux righteousness as a way to engage Flannery, and she's having none of it. But he tries to give it this sincerity that I think is fascinating.
Yeah, I would argue that it's the second best performance in the movie. I think he's I was
really
very
great.
just stunned by that moment. Yes.
I completely agree. And I don't know if it's just because I miss Philip Seymour Hoffman so much that anytime I can see Cooper,
it's nice.
It's just like a nice,
I agree.
Thing.
I can't trust myself with criticism of his performances because I'm like, oh, his face is there. It's like he's back, kind of like it's as close as we're gonna get.
And look, I think he's good here, or at least serviceable. But I always enjoy him because of that. Yeah, horrifying. Yes. The character is horrifying for sure. But he's good at presenting that in the performance as well. As we wind down here, Dave, do you have any final thoughts on Wildcat?
I mean, just jumping off something you said, I just think that great art, it's us being a part of great art is not passive. Challenging art, we're going to be forced to try. It's going to be effortful. Not every movie is just for your entertainment, right? There's a big difference between watching Raiders of the Lost Ark and watching Stalker. They're the same art form, but are they? Sometimes it feels like they're not. And I'm not saying that this is as kind of obtuse as something like Tarkovsky, but it is something that actively challenges you to get on its wavelength or get the hell out of the theater. Like, that is the kind of movie it is. And I was watching it with some friends, and some of my friends did not like this movie. They were kind of like, oh, I don't know. I just couldn't get into it. And you do have to really make an effort. But I think if you do make an effort, especially if you are either a person of faith or a person who has struggled with faith, I think there's a lot to gain from watching this movie. And watching seems like too passive a word. This is a movie that you dive into or you don't. And I think it will be very rewarding for the few of us who actually do make the real attempt to find the wavelength that Ethan and Maya Hawke are on. It is probably the most rewarding experience I've had in a movie theater this year. And getting to watch it again. I was so glad you asked. I was like, when you asked me to be on a podcast, I was like, do I have time? And then you're like, it's for Wildcat. And I was like, dang it. All right. Yes, I will do this. So it became this opportunity. And that's how I felt, is like, I get to watch Wildcat again. And there are very few films that you've seen more than once that you have that immediate, like, this is an opportunity. Not like this is homework. This is something I like doing, but it's also something I have to do. This was like a real moment of like, I get to experience this again. And I really was looking forward to, is it going to have an impact still? And it still does, because I think this is a movie of actual depth, unlike most things that are in theaters right now.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, I
think
just
that
watched
is
The
well said.
Crow, and I'm feeling really
Oh,
bad about movie theaters right now.
The Crow, our podcast review of that is also available right now. You can go and check that out. I had a great fun
Condolences.
conversation with Kenzie from All Screen Central. It was a fun conversation, but I agree
Well,
with you. Not a great movie.
Kenzie's great. I love her passion for
Yes.
that weird Skarsgård guy. I love her passion.
Yeah.
She's a great follow on Twitter, but
Absolutely.
it's not for me. But this
Yeah.
one is. This one is for me.
Yeah,
So.
Wildcat.
It's a great thing about
is-
movies, right? Is that you can find we all have different reactions to these things.
We all
Like I
have
said,
different
this
things.
is a movie that if you don't like it, I get it. But
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not you. I'm glad I like it.
I like it as well, and I understand if it's not something that you go for, but
Totally.
I really loved it. And to compliment something that Dave said a moment ago as well, as far as faith and how it's depicted here, if that is something that is appealing to you, I think you will have I think you will like this film, at least on some level, as it relates to Flannery and her struggle with it. But even if it's not, I still think there's something so arresting about her performance and the artistry from Ethan Hawke that even if faith is foreign to you and it's not something that you grapple with personally, I still think the performance and Ethan Hawke's direction is something worth giving it a go. If you like Ethan Hawke's directing style, or if anything we said here is interesting, like I still think even as an outsider, cinematically, I think this film has a lot to offer that I think people could enjoy. And also just Flannery's artistry, like her writing and how that is infused into this film, how it informs so much of what we see from a cinematic perspective, I just think is incredibly expressive here. It's really, really fantastic. So I do really like it, for whatever that's worth. I guess it's me and Dave and maybe a handful of others, but we will
Me and you and Ethan and Maya against the world.
Exactly. So if you agree or disagree with anything we had to say here, please leave a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can email us in sessionfilm@gmail.com. As I mentioned, our review of The Crow is available. Our 2000 retrospective is available. We talk about our top 10 movies of 2000. Our review of Almost Famous, which is a part of that retrospective, is also available. It's been a very, very busy week, but a fun week. I look forward to our Best of the Decade awards coming on episode 600, just around the corner. So make sure you are subscribed and ready for that. Dave, before we get out of here, any final thoughts on anything before we leave?
Yeah, I'll just say, if you want more of me, listen to my podcast, Pop Culture Case Study. And if you want more of my writing, check out InSessionFilm.com.
Yep. Dave, always doing great work over there at InSessionFilm.com with all of our great writers over there. Got a lot of love today, Dave, online. I don't know if you saw that or not.
Yeah, it's like every once in a while I'm nice and people don't know how to react. So
that's great. It's well-deserved love. Absolutely well-deserved. But yeah, thanks for all you do. And yeah, please go check out Pop Culture Case Study. I might be making an appearance on that very soon.
could be.
So maybe you should go subscribed and be on the lookout for that as well. All right. With all of that said, thanks, Dave, for being here. Really do appreciate you, my friend. This was a really fun conversation. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast.